Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring Lake Shetek State Park, down in southwestern Minnesota.
A really fascinating place.
And right away, there's a neat little twist with the name, Shetek. It's Ojibwe for pelican.
That's right.
But then you have Loon Island nearby. And get this, the story goes that early settlers weren't actually targeting loons there.
No, it was cormorants. Kind of a misnomer that stuck.
Exactly. It shows how place names can have these surprising backstories.
Definitely. And Lake Shetek itself, like you said, it's a big deal for the region, largest lake in that part of the state. And it's the headwaters of the Des Moines River, so hugely important geographically.
People love it for recreation, obviously.
Yeah.
Boating, swimming.
Absolutely. But there's, a really deep history there, too, some of it quite poignant.
Right. And that's what we love digging into for you, our listener, finding those hidden stories. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a bit.
Yeah, we've got historical accounts, geological surveys,
recreational guides, and even a very recent fisheries report from the Minnesota DNR.
Pretty comprehensive stuff.
Our mission, as always, is to explore the history, the highlights, the fascinating facts of Lake Shetek State Park. So let's dive in. Where do we start? Geology.
Geology seems like the right place. You have to go way back to the last ice age, the Wisconsin glaciation.
Okay.
That's what really shaped this whole landscape. The park actually sits on something called the Altamont Moraine.
A moraine. That's like the edge where the glacier stops.
Exactly. It's basically a ridge of debris left behind.
Yeah.
And the amount of glacial, that's the ground-up rock and sediment, is just immense.
Right.
Over 375 feet deep, just outside the park.
Wow, 375 feet.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of the power of that ice.
So how does a pile of glacial debris turn into the region's largest lake?
Well, as the glaciers started melting, maybe around 15,000 years ago, the meltwater carved channels. Lake Shetek formed where two of these channels basically ran into each other, the Beaver Creek Channel and the Des Moines River Channel.
Okay, an intersection.
Right. And as they met, sediment built up, banks slumped. It sort of created a natural dam.
Oh, so the water backed up.
Exactly. That blockage, plus the continued meltwater, formed this large, but actually quite shallow, lake. It's kind of a geological fluke in an area that doesn't have many big lakes.
That is fascinating. A giant, shallow lake created by melting ice and collapsing banks. You can see why people would be drawn there.
For sure. Water is life, right?
Who were the first people we know of?
Well, the earliest signs probably point to nomadic groups following bison herds to the lake.
Makes sense.
But the first identifiable permanent inhabitants, archaeologically speaking, belong to the Great Oasis culture. We're talking around 900 AD.
Okay. And there's evidence in the park?
Yes, a survey back in '73 actually found burial mounds right within the park boundaries.
Wow.
So, tangible proof. By the time we get to the historical period, though, this was firmly Dakota territory.
And then European explorers started showing up.
In the 1830s and 40s, yeah. People like George Catlin, the artist.
Oh, yeah. Famous for his paintings of Native Americans.
Right. And Joseph Nicollet, Philander Prescott, John C. Fremont, they all passed through and noted the area.
But settlement came later.
The first permanent white settler didn't arrive until 1856.
Okay, 1856. Which unfortunately brings us to a very difficult chapter.
Yeah. The US-Dakota Conflict of 1862 and the events right there at Lake Shetek.
What was the situation like just before that?
By 1862, you had maybe half a dozen settler families living along the east side of the lake. Life was tough, obviously, but the bigger issue was the mounting tension.
Between the Dakota and the settlers.
And the U.S. government, crucially. The Dakota had been forced onto reservations. Treaties were consistently violated by the government.
Annuity payments were a big problem, weren't they?
Huge. They were often late or reduced or unfairly distributed by traders. There was real hardship, hunger, and deep resentment building among the Dakota. It was an incredibly volatile situation.
A pressure cooker, like you said earlier.
Exactly. And it exploded on August 20th, 1862.
What happened that day?
A group of Dakota men came to the cabin of Andreas and Christina Koch. They asked for water. And then Andreas was shot and killed.
Oh, terrible.
Christina was spared, told to leave. She ran to warn the other families.
So they gathered together.
They did, trying to figure out how to escape, but they were overtaken. There was an attempt to hide in a nearby slough, and during that chaos, one of the settlers shot and killed a Dakota man named Lean Bear.
And that just ignited everything.
It did. It led to a firefight that lasted about 4 hours right there in the marsh. It became known as Slaughter Slough.
Just horrific. What was the outcome for the settlers?
15 settlers died that day from 6 different families. 21 managed to survive, mostly by hiding.
And some were taken captive.
Yes, 3 women, including Christina Koch and another woman named Laura Dooley, and 8 or 9 children. Laura Dooley's baby actually died during the captivity.
Heartbreaking.
They were eventually ransomed months later. The victims were initially buried hastily near the slough. It wasn't until nearly 2 months later a military group came and gave them a more proper burial. Then, in 1863, William Dooley Sr., who'd survived, came back with others and reburied the remains where the monument stands today.
That monument, it was put up later.
Erected in 1924, dedicated in 1925, it marks the final resting place for 6 adults and 8 children from that day. It's a very somber place.
Understandably. Is anything left from that original settlement?
Just one building. The Koch cabin.
The one where the attack began.
That's the one. It was moved into the state park in 1961. It's actually the oldest standing building in all of Murray County now.
Wow. And they furnished it.
Yeah, with replica items from the period, trying to show what life was like for the Koch family. It's a really tangible link to that time.
It's so important to remember these events, but also the context, right? The park itself and the sources we looked at, they try to explain the lead-up.
They do, and that's crucial. The park's informational signs and groups like the Minnesota Historical Society, they explicitly talk about the broken treaties, the injustices, the desperation faced by the Dakota.
It wasn't just an isolated incident.
Absolutely not. It was part of the much larger US-Dakota conflict, fueled by years of government failures and mistreatment. Understanding that broader context is vital. It's a painful history, but we have to acknowledge all sides of it.
Agreed. It's hard to imagine that beautiful park landscape was the site of such tragedy. But the park's story takes another big turn in the 1930s.
It does, a completely different chapter. After the conflict, the area was largely abandoned by settlers for decades. Then came the Great Depression and the New Deal.
The WPA, the Works Progress Administration.
Exactly. Lake Shetek State Park was basically created as a WPA project.
Why there?
Well, 2 main reasons. 1, bring recreation to an area that didn't have many lakes, and 2, take some pressure off Camden State Park, which was getting overcrowded.
Okay, so create jobs and create a park.
Pretty much. They set up a WPA camp on Keeley Island in 1934. About 200 men lived and worked there.
What kind of work were they doing?
Building everything, really. The entrance road, campgrounds, picnic spots, the beach, even a sewage system.
And those distinctive buildings.
Yep, using local materials, stone, timber in that classic National Park Service rustic style. The beach house went up in 39, the mess hall in 40.
And the causeways connecting the islands.
That too. The stone causeway going out to Loon Island is a major WPA feature.
I read that some of those WPA structures are actually on the National Register of Historic Places now.
They are 2 whole districts, actually, listed back in 1992.
Which ones?
There's the Lakeshore District that includes the Loon Island Causeway, the beach house, stone steps, a kitchen shelter, sanitation building, even drinking fountains.
Wow.
And then the Zuya Group Center District, which has the mess hall and a crafts and recreation building. The beach house is considered a particularly fine example of the style.
It really is amazing how much they built and how it still defines the park's look and feel. What about Keeley Island? Didn't they start a causeway there too?
They did. They intended to connect Keeley Island to Loon Island. But then World War II started, the WPA was shut down.
And the causeway never got finished?
Never finished. So Keeley Island remained pretty separate, and eventually the state sold that property. The old WPA camp area is now used by a religious group.
Huh. Interesting piece of unfinished history there.
Mm-hmm.
But the park kept developing after the WPA years.
Oh, yeah. Around 1950, they put in some fish-rearing ponds, though the park manages those now. The park boundaries expanded a bit in the 60s.
Still some private land inside the park, though, right?
Yeah, there are still some private inholdings. They also built the current park office and interpretive center during that period.
And that paved trail connecting to Curry.
That was a big addition in 1996. It's part of the Casey Jones State Trail System.
Nice.
And more recently, starting around 2010, they've been doing campground upgrades, adding more RV hookups, modernizing things a bit.
It sounds like they've really tried to keep up with visitor needs while preserving the park's character.
That seems to be the balance they strike.
And obviously, the lake itself is still the main draw.
Absolutely. Boating, kayaking, canoeing, swimming, all the classic lake activities. You can rent boats and kayaks there too, which is handy.
And hiking.
14 miles of trails. including that nice 1.5-mile interpretive trail on Loon Island, which you get to using that WPA causeway.
And Loon Island itself, despite the name confusion, is good for wildlife now.
It is, especially birds. After Dutch elm disease hit, basswood trees really took over.
Oh, okay.
And basswoods are great for cavity nesting birds. So you see lots of rose-breasted grosbeaks, woodpeckers, even pileated woodpeckers,
Birds.
blue jays, nuthatches, chickadees. It's a neat example of how the ecosystem changed and adapted.
Cool. And there's the paved trail for biking and skating, too.
Right, that 6-mile loop to Curry, great for exercise. Plus you've got winter stuff like ice fishing and snowmobiling.
And the history aspect with the interpretive center and the Coke Cave.
Exactly, it really covers a lot of bases.
You mentioned birds are a big deal there. Why is Shetek so good for bird watching?
Location, location, location. Being the headwaters of the Des Moines River makes it a natural migration corridor, a flyway.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So you get a huge variety passing through, plus the residents. The mix of habitats, open lake, woods, marshes supports a lot of different species.
Like what?
Well, on the water, lots of waterfowl ducks, herons, coots, grebes, and those white pelicans, of course.
The lake's namesake.
Right. In the woods, you'll hear warblers, flycatchers, thrushes, blue-gray gnatcatchers. Marshes have rails, sparrows, blackbirds.
Is there a particularly good spot to watch from?
The Eastlick Marsh observation deck is excellent. They even have a spotting scoop.
Oh, nice.
From there, you can often see pelicans, mallards, geese, red-winged blackbirds, but also prairie birds, swallows, bluebirds, bobolinks, pheasants, turkey vultures.
Quite a list.
There's also the Webster Island Trail, which goes into a quieter wetland, good for seeing waterfowl away from the main lake traffic. And Loon Island, like we said, for woodland birds.
Sounds like a birder needs to bring their checklist.
The DNR actually provides a specific bird checklist for Lake Shetek State Park. Very helpful.
Great resource.
Uh,
Okay, what about fishing? You mentioned that recent DNR report.
Yeah, fishing is definitely popular. The lake's known for walleye, northern pike, perch, bullhead, crappie, channel catfish. A pretty good mix.
And the 2024 survey confirmed that.
It did. The survey, done in August 2024, used gill nets and trap nets to sample the population.
Standard practice.
Yep. Gives them a snapshot. They found good numbers of black bullhead, black crappie, walleye, northern pike, yellow perch, also caught common carp, bigmouth buffalo, suckers, bluegill, quillback, white crappie, yellow bullhead.
So a healthy, diverse fishery.
Looks like it. The report also noted the lake size about 3,462 acres in Minnesota, max depth of 36 feet, and confirmed the public access points. It shows they're actively monitoring the lake's health.
Good to know. What about other wildlife besides birds and fish?
You can see a fair bit. White-tailed deer are common. Also, foxes, minks, beavers, fox squirrels, muskrats, groundhogs. Maybe even a coyote if you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on your perspective.
Right. So definitely keep your eyes peeled on the trails.
Worth doing.
It really sounds like Lake Shetek packs a lot in. You've got the glacial origins, the really tough history with the conflict,
The hopeful rebuilding during the Depression with the WPA.
and now this vibrant place for recreation that's also ecologically important.
Exactly. It connects so many threads. Geology, human history, ecology, recreation. It really tells a story.
So for you listening, if you're looking for a place with beautiful scenery but also layers of stories to uncover, Lake Shetek State Park definitely seems worth checking out.
Whether you want to hike, paddle, fish, birdwatch, or just reflect on the past.
It offers a lot.
It really does. And maybe it makes us think,
Yeah.
when we visit these beautiful parks, these places we go to relax and have fun. How do we also make space to remember the more complex, sometimes difficult histories that happen right there on that same land? How does knowing those stories change how we see these places today?
That's a really great question to ponder. Something to think about on your next park adventure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Until next time on the Deep Dive.